Hey everybody, I'm Ollie from Spectre Studios and we're going to do a Mars base today. So go ahead and grab yourself a base. You can definitely do this when the miniature's already loaded up, or you can go ahead and do it like I'm doing it here and assemble something before putting your miniature down. I got myself some cork sheet from a local hardware store here called Bunnings. They come in a pack of about 5 to 10 and it literally just tears off and you can assemble it. They look quite realistic once you sort of get some jagged edges and things like that. Just go ahead and get your super glue, take some of the torn off cork pieces, layer them up as much as you want. You can pretty much layer it as low or as high as you want to, doesn't matter too much. In this example I wanted to layer it a bit higher and add a few more rocks just to show that you can really take this effect as far as you want to. Sorry for my fat hand in the way. Now with this Zappa stuff, seriously, don't get it on your hands, you will absolutely stick your fingers together. I prefer to use this stuff over conventional super glue because once I've glued something I don't want it to move ever again, and the bonds just feel particularly tough with this sort of stuff. I don't see why you couldn't use PVA glue as well, but just make sure you give it enough time to dry to make sure that it's all happy days. Alrighty, so I've sort of got my stack of rocks here, making sure it's all locked in. I added a bit more super glue on the top just to make sure it all linked together, and that's a bit what it looks like. Happy days. Excuse the pain on my fingers. Alright, so now I've primed it black with just a rattle can. Now I'm going to use Mornfang Brown and Mechanicus Standard Grey just to lay in some colours. You do not need to use these colours. Any neutral grey, any neutral brown will get you to where you want to be. You could get a very similar colour from Vallejo, Monument Hobbies, Citadel. It doesn't really matter. As long as you've got a rock colour and then you've got a dirt colour, it doesn't matter. The one thing we don't want is to leave any black showing through on the bit where we're going to put the technical paint down. But you can afford to leave a little bit of black in the crevices here on the rock. It'll just add to the effect and add a bit of depth to them. Usually I use a wet palette, but in this case I really don't mind if the paint creates a sort of a three-dimensional texture on there. It's only going to add to the effect again, so you can see I just go ahead and put the paint straight down on my palette and go ahead and get smacking with the layers. Now that that's all on, we're going to go ahead and grab the Mornfang Brown. Again, you can use any brown you want. It's going to go underneath the technical paint just so that when it crackles and separates you won't be seeing black through, you'll see a brown colour instead. Again, I didn't worry about the wet palette here. I really don't mind if there's some three-dimensional texture. You'll probably see in a minute I do actually leave a couple of globby spots on there, but that's really neither here nor there. The super glue that I use is also still showing through there in sort of a three-dimensional shape, so don't stress about it at all. Just try and get rid of all of that black colour from the base. I'm really not being particularly neat. I also just try and catch some of the undersides of some of these rocks and some of the joints, because you would expect naturally that some of the dust and dirt would catch under those rock formations, so just jam it in there. Can't hurt. Alright, now that that's dry, we're going to go ahead and apply some technical paint. We've got some Martian Iron Crust and Martian Iron Earth. It really doesn't matter which one you use. If I find an option which is not Citadel for this, I'll let you know, but for now this seems to be the only one that I've found work. A, because it's the colour that I want, and B, because it gives me the technical result that I want. I'm going to use both of these in this video just to show you that it doesn't matter which one of these two that you use. So I've just grabbed some Iron Crust there and spread it around. That's probably my favourite of the two. But then I've just grabbed the Iron Earth, which is more of a crackle texture, and put it on the other side of the base. Once we end up hitting it with the dust, you honestly won't be able to tell the difference. I may even do some tester videos where I use the same AK interactive sort of the grit texture, and then just put some orange paint over the top. I think the trick is just trying to match up the reddy orange colour that are in these technical paints with a usual acrylic. So I'm getting a nice thick layer on there. Don't be afraid to lay it on pretty thick. With these technical paints, the thicker your layers, the more intense the technical effect is going to be. So if you want big cracks on the iron earth, you need to put on a thick layer. And if you want some reasonable separation with the iron crust, it's the same sort of thing. Keep in mind that with regard to your miniature adhesion, you need to kind of make sure that you figure out where you're going to mount them. Otherwise you'll start to see some gaps. So generally with my miniatures in the past, I have had my miniature on the base prior to this step. But it really doesn't matter, you can do it the way that you want to do it. Especially with my dune crawler, which you'll see a picture of down the track. I mounted that after the base was done for obvious reasons, and that was pretty easy. It looks pretty terrible at the moment, but I promise that once the effect is all looking good, it'll all come together and you guys will see what I'm talking about. You can see now that it's dry, I've got some reasonable cracks and some decent separation. But it's not looking like a Mars base yet, right? So first I want to create a little bit of contrast. So I'm just going to hit it with a really thick all over layer of Reikland Flesh Shade. This is the matte version, this is not the Reikland Flesh Shade gloss. And then by the time I get this all on there, it does dry for some reason a little bit glossy, but it's not going to ruin your effects, so don't worry about it too much. Alright, so that's sort of getting pretty good in there. I don't mind about the Reikland Flesh Shade getting into the rock either. It'll just add to the contrast, and we're going to cover it with pigment shortly afterwards anyway. So the fact that it's going to dry a little bit glossy isn't going to worry us too much. You can hit it with a matte varnish if you want to. You really don't have to. It's not going to matter, and you'll see what I mean by that shortly. But that flesh shade there is just kind of, it's warmed up and darkened down that red earth just a little bit, and it's fallen into all the cracks and all the separation on that texture paint, which is really good. If you do see any obvious pooling, feel free to get rid of it. I've got a little bit on the rim there that I haven't noticed yet, but I will notice it in a second. Yeah, see, there it is. Now let's go and get rid of it. There we go. You can always clean it up with your finger or a bit of paper towel. Never hurt anybody. There is a bit of pooling there, but I'm not too worried about it. Alright, now that that's dry, you see what I mean by that slight glossiness. But it doesn't matter, don't stress. We'll hit it with that coat of Asterath red. Any lighter red. If you don't have the Asterath red dry paint, you can hit it with a very light dry brush of Wild Rider red, Evil Sun Scarlet, mixed in with a bit of orange. Again, it doesn't matter too much, just as long as you're creating a bit of contrast on that red-orange spectrum, you won't be doing yourself any mischief. I've just got a makeup brush here. I think it cost me $4 Australian from Kmart, and it just gets the job done. You can push this more towards the tan side if you want to by boning it up with some Shabby Bone or Screaming Skull, something like that, but personally I wanted to leave it on the red spectrum. There's really no one size fits all recipe here because the next step in the pigments is what's going to tie everything together. For the rock, I'm just going to hit it with a very light dry brush of Longbeard Grey. I just have a very small old buggered brush here that I'm going to use for it. And then just not necessarily trying to avoid the texture paint that we've got on the rock there at all, but I'm just trying to tie the whole thing together a little bit. So try and focus it to the rocks. If you get it on some of the red, it's no big deal, seriously no big deal. Great, that's looking good. Reinforce it just a little bit more on those top edges there that you can see. I really like the Longbeard Grey paint. Of the dry paints, which aren't amazing anyway, the Longbeard Grey does some serious work. I think the dry paints kind of get looked over a little bit, but no, this one's particularly good and I like it. And still, the base is looking rubbish, but this is the bit that's going to fix it. We're using Vallejo Pigments Dark Red Ochre, specifically the Dark Red Ochre. That's the one we're going to use here to make sure that we get that really lovely orangey red dirt that you'd expect to find on the surface of Mars. Get a bit of paper towel, pop it down. This is going to be messy. I was using an old synthetic brush here. Spread it around. I'm not working it in just yet. I just want to kind of get it all around the base. This is what's really going to sell the effect. I mentioned it in my last video of how to make a wasteland base, that a lot of people will secure their pigments with an isopropyl alcohol or some sort of white spirit, or you pick a medium really. I choose not to, and the reason why I choose not to is because I really like the dusty look. And even though you'll still get a slight dusty look if you seal it in with the isopropyl alcohol, it isn't my jam, so I elect to leave it dusty. It won't stand up to heaps of tabletop punishment over the years, but there's nothing wrong with coming in later and adding a bit more pigment over the top. If you do, however, want to make it as hardy as you possibly can make it, get a dropper, like one of those eyedropper things, or a pipette, and then just slowly but surely add little drops of isopropyl alcohol over the top of the base. Don't let it splash, but that'll secure it in there. You can see here I'm just hitting the underside of the rocks as well, or any of the lower facing sides of the rocks, to tie that dust in with the rest of the base there. And now I'm really getting in fairly rough with the brush as well, working it all into the nooks and crannies. That's it. I think it's looking pretty great. So you'll go around the edge of the base now with black. You can put the rims whatever color you want, but let's be honest, black's the best color. And once that is all tidied up, you'll have a completed Mars base. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'll do my very best to get to your answers as soon as I possibly can. It's been a real joy making these tutorials for you so far. We've got a little community brewing on the Discord, so if you have any questions on there that you want to ask or request some tutorials, jump on there. You'll be able to find my links in the About Me section. Alright, I think we're done, and that looks pretty sweet, if I do say so myself. Hopefully you use this as a bit of an inspiration to make your own Mars bases, and that's what it looks like on a larger model all completed. Exactly the same process. So it's truly scalable up. Thanks everybody, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe and like this video. Cheers.